Good morning. Welcome to the Late to Work podcast. This is Parker, your host, and thank you so much for joining this morning. Today is a really special day. This is the first Late to Work podcast recorded on a plane. I'm currently on my way from San Francisco back to Michigan, and it's going well so far. So thank you for tuning in. We are 32,000 feet up with some clear skies. I'm currently in the bathroom recording this. I didn't want to disturb the guy next to me. But yeah, I hope your commute's going well. If you're on a plane listening to this, welcome and glad to have you. Today we have a guest named Michael who would love to talk about some stuff regarding relationships and girls. And Michael, if you could just take it away, we'd love to hear what you got to say.
Hey Parker, thanks for having me today. I just wanted to, I was trying to think about what topic to speak about, and I think the number one that came to my mind was just dating and girls, because I think it's really, really, really easy for people to get wrapped up in that. And I know for me, it's been a real struggle, because I think one of the biggest problems our society faces is fairy tales. And I know for me, I'm very much an idealist, and I very much see a situation or think about something and imagine it in either the best way possible or the worst way possible. And I think one of the main things that people realize is life is never what you think it's going to be. And for relationships, that was really hard. This past semester at college, I had my first kiss. And I think before you kiss someone, it's always one of those things where you build up in your mind, and our culture treats it as such like a coming of age moment, like you have your first kiss and it's going to change your life. And I remember having it with this girl that I kind of liked, and she kind of liked me, but I remember a lot of it was I was just like, okay, I'm an attractive guy, I should have my first kiss by now. And so what happened is we did it. And I remember feeling afterward, I was like, man, I feel like that should have been more awesome. Like, I feel like it wasn't one of those things where I was like, oh my gosh, I can fly. It was like the most amazing moment of my life. It was like, okay, that was really fun, but what was all the hype for? Like, why did I build that up in my head as the greatest moment ever? And I think a lot of times people do that in real life. I think that's why a lot of relationships fall apart and a lot of marriages do, is because you watch these movies, especially Disney movies, where it's like you meet instantaneously, you have a connection. Both people are, of course, really attractive. And they just have this kiss, and it's the most perfect thing ever, and then the relationship just naturally, or really unnaturally develops, actually, because typically they spend about a couple days, maybe a week together, and they're like, oh my gosh, you're my person, like, this is gonna be great, and that's the happily ever after thing. But you never address potential pitfalls in a relationship or the first fight or any of that. It's all positive. And I think a lot of the reason why people tend to be so idealistic in relationships, and why I think a lot of times people refuse to see the bad parts of people, is because I think naturally in our society there's a lot of cynical things and a lot of cynical people. And so I think relationships is kind of that one area where people are like, look for that light and look for that redemption in a way, when they really shouldn't, because everybody's messed up, everybody's going through stuff, and if you go into a relationship expecting every day to be the most exciting adventure of your life, you're gonna be disappointed. And I know I definitely found that myself, and that's not a discouragement. Like, falling in love is awesome. It's like one of the best feelings you'll ever feel, but I think you need to go into that with the expectation that there's gonna be some really, really rough times too. But that's just part of the growing process. And I think that's a lot more beautiful in the end than having that perfect relationship where nothing bad ever happened. So, yeah, just kind of wanted to share that. Thanks for having me on, man. Peace.
And we're back. Thank you so much, Michael, for sharing. Really interesting point of view you had to share. Feel free to share in the future, and we'd love to hear what you have to say. One thing I wanted to talk about real quick I can't make this podcast too long, but I did want to talk about ambulances. And at my design firm that I work at, we are designing ambulance stretchers for Furno, which is a ambulance company. They make equipment for that. And something really interesting that I learned was a lot of the attachments that they use for current ambulances, like to hold the ambulance stretcher down inside of the ambulance, is not rated to withstand a crash. So like a seatbelt will help you not die in a crash, whereas a stretcher, when it's held down, like let's say you're injured on the stretcher in the ambulance, half of those mechanisms are actually not rated for crashes. And so the newer ones are, and a lot of cities are moving towards the newer ones, but a lot of cities still don't have access to those. So it's really interesting, like if you're in an ambulance and you get into a crash, half the time you're just going to die. You're just going to fly out of the stretcher, and it's going to be a mess, which I found that really interesting. But anyway, that's the podcast for today. Real quick and short. Thank you so much for joining. If you ever have something to say, feel free to whip out your phone, record yourself on some thought you have in life, and email it to late2workpodcast@gmail.com. And if you are chosen for a podcast, you'll get entered into a monthly competition for a Starbucks gift card. And who doesn't like Starbucks? You get to drive to work listening to this podcast and with a Starbucks in your hand. So feel free to submit whenever you like, and I'll check out what you have to say. I look forward to hearing your submissions. This is Parker, your host. Thank you so much for joining, and I will talk to you in the next one.